Welcome to Open Mind Lounge. In today's episode, Victor meets Peter Kirwan to discuss the implications of AI on humanity, focusing on MeBot.ai's development, challenges, and ethical considerations.
Welcome everyone to Open Mind Lounge. I'm your host, Victor Singh, and today we're diving heads fast into a fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of AI, artificial intelligence. As you all know, it's having out there competitors and a lot of talk about AI. And our guest today is a true visionary, someone who is not just riding the wave of technological changes, but actually shaping it. Peter Kirwan is the CEO and co-founder of MeBot.ai, a platform that quite literally allows busy people like you and myself to create our own AI clones of ourselves. We'll go deeper into that afterwards. But this is a digital representation of yourself, and Peter's journey is nothing less than but amazing and diverse. I must say, he is everything from a SaaS experience, data centers, into music industry. Yes, he's a semi-retired DJ with seriously vinyl addiction. You know, vinyl is old school, guys. If you don't know what that is, we'll come to back later. He is constantly being ahead of the curve and identifying emerging trends and building successful businesses around himself and for others. Today's talk will go right into implications of AI and humanity. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. Great to be here.
Thank you. And I'm happy to see you here as well. So, Peter, you have an impressive background, and I'm really thrilled to have you on board on this show of ours. Let us just talk about human and AI intelligence, the future of it, starting with the scaling an AI company, because as I understand, you have a vast experience with building companies and successfully building something from scratch. What inspired you to start or join an AI company? And what were your first step? How did you come to it?
Well, it's funny. There were sort of two phases in this. I actually, about 30 years ago, I think my grandmother was still alive then, and she was in her 80s. And I remember thinking she's not going to be here forever. So I had some recordings I made of her, and I took some pictures of her from different angles, and I told her that someday, and this was back when I think the Macintosh was, this is like the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, 80.
Yeah. And I said, someday I'll be able to turn this into some kind of version of you, digital version of you in the future, which she wasn't so sure about. But anyway, it finally happened. I actually did it. So it was a long road to get there. But a few years ago, I saw this was an opportunity that was finally getting to be possible. Although, to be honest, might have gotten into it a little bit too early. It was very, very difficult to do. It's now getting much easier to clone a person's voice and their visual appearance and their personality and knowledge. Really only in the last year has that been possible.
Mm-hmm. Impressive. So you basically started from emotional connection, our urge to be actually being able to see or be connected to your grandmother. That's really nice.
Yeah, it was fun because, well, she always was a very she moved to the United States when she was 21. She wanted an adventure, came from a small town in Germany, and so she was not a technical person, but this would really have excited her to see this. And in fact, a few days ago, I spoke at a conference, and I had a big slide on the screen, and it was of my grandmother. I was talking about the AI clones, and I thought for that moment, I just thought this would have been really fun for her to actually see that she was at a tech conference being used as an example.
Wow. Oh, amazing. But that's actually very heartwarming and a good intention also, you know. You kind of see that in a movie, that where somebody wants to talk to their uh, older people or somebody love or missed, and then here you had this inspiration, and you did something about it, no doubt. And it had it yeah, I reckon it had to be hard if this idea was from the 80s, and you've been going on with this for such a while, and recently getting something substantial. That had to take you quite a while, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, the whole AI world has caught up with this idea, and now there's just so many more things that I never would have imagined that you can do. Because, I mean, I think the idea of talking to your grandmother is an emotional connection, but there's also a lot of very practical things you can do, which is people are starting to use AI clones of themselves for a lot of actual work to get done, which is cloning a CEO of a company that then can create videos or emails or documents in their style, but also things like coaches or therapists or celebrities wanting to interact with their clients or fans, and being able to do that in an infinitely scalable way. We're just at the early beginnings of that. It's just gotten to be something that really works only in the last, I would say, 6 months. Does it actually work well enough where you feel like, oh, this is actually quite convincing?
And scary, and not to mention scary.
Well,
Scary.
I think that I'm probably older than you, Victor, but if we talk to people that are younger, my relationships in my life were first made with a person in person.
Yeah.
The idea of meeting someone first not in person was impossible. Just maybe you had a pen pal. I don't know. That was the only thing
I remember that at school. Yeah.
That was something that existed.
I had mine in Vietnam when I was at school. So
okay. Yeah. So but now it's very, very likely that you've met, if you're a young person under the age of 30 or 25, or you've met people you're friends with that you've never actually met in person. So the idea of going from a real in-person relationship to one that is not in person seems a little bit strange, or it seems this virtual version. But if you start with a relationship that starts digital, to create an AI version of a digital relationship is quite easy, because you don't have anything to compare it to. So I think I think it's hard when you talk to people. You've got to put it in the frame of reference that they're coming from in their relationships, which is changing all the time. I mean, it's changing constantly.
Yeah, I sort of can relate to that. We recently I read an article that Gen Z, for instance, or Gen Alpha, the new generation, which is I'm millennium, and then you are probably before me. We sort of, when I grew up, I grew up with the internet, the modem, and the CDs, just like you had vinyl, and saw the revolution of the computer and the gaming story, and how that evolved. But now I see the kids are sort of connected. They are born in a connectivity world. It's online from the very first step they take into the world. It's online and digital. And I think I can relate to the vision which you are now saying, that I think it might be more acceptable for the new generation, but kind of difficult for the more older or more grown-ups to who are more mature, the CEOs maybe, who couldn't actually see themselves as a digital version of themselves in a meeting. They had to be there because, as you mentioned, because of the connection, the bound they sort of create, the emotional bound.
Right.
So I think that's interesting. Let me go into the next question. What sort of hurdles do you sort of mentioned that in the early days? What was it most difficult, from the fundraising to finding talents? What did you struggle most with when you started?
Well, for this company, I fortunately I've sold other companies in the past, and I was able to fund this myself to this point. At some point, we will want to raise money. I think, in the very beginning, it was really technology. We started this company, I don't know if GPT-3 was maybe out. And so the idea was you would have this, even with a text interface, just chatting with someone was not there yet. To train it to be like a person was so primitive that it was very slow, and it just wasn't convincing. And so that was something we ran into right away, was saying this technology isn't there. And we started playing with the voice, and you couldn't do it in real time. It was very discouraging, to be honest with you. We had this great idea. We knew we were right, and we knew it would get there someday, but it just didn't seem to be happening fast enough. Even though the AI has been moving so quickly, this specific area, the difference between, say, you're using a Siri or Alexa, and you're asking a question, and it's utilitarian kind of thing. You're saying, give me the weather, or give me, and you wait a couple of seconds and you get a response. That's completely fine. But that's not an emotional connection. You don't have an emotional connection. When somebody stops and waits too long, then it breaks the spell. So we were it was critical to us that be the case. And so that was probably the biggest problem, is that we just didn't feel like, even though you could have a conversation and as a novelty, it was like, oh, that's great, it doesn't really last if it breaks the spell. So that was, I think, the beginning. We were discouraged by that. And then so we just ran into one technology problem after another. We realized we would have to hire so many people to try to solve these problems. But fortunately, OpenAI and other players move forward quickly, and their technology got better. And then a company called Grok, GROQ, came along, and it's one of those things. I think it's just a good example. Is you can have everything worked out, and there's just one little piece is missing. And Grok makes these chips that accelerate large language models, and Llama was released by Meta, which is open source, and so they were able to run that on their servers with this accelerated chip, and it sped up the response like 10x what it was before, and 1/10 the cost, and it just suddenly made something that just was not working suddenly work, and we can have this fluid conversation. And you just don't know when that moment is going to come, who's going to come out. But you have to, if you're really doing something cutting edge, sometimes you have to say, okay, there's 10 things that I need, and only 7 of them actually exist today, and these other 3, I'm pretty sure they're going to happen, we don't know when. And then you just have to hope those 3 fall into place to make it work. And that can be very risky, because it's not all within your control. And yeah, in the old days, you used to maybe have it more in your control, but today everything is an ecosystem, and you have to count on connecting to a lot of other platforms.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking, because you mentioned Grok, which sort of X is using Grok in their AI, like in their technology
just to clarify, that's GROQ. I'm sorry, GROK. GROK is Elon Musk's Grok, which is the X one. This is GROQ, and GRQ is a different company, and it makes this chip, and they host large language models. They're like a hosting company using their own chips.
That's
so it's actually sense. They don't make their own. Yeah, so
that makes sense.
So for example, just to give you a little very relevant use of Grok, GROQ is that when DeepSeek came out, it was open source. And so if you wanted to host your stuff on their servers, use their LLM hosted in China, you're all under the Chinese laws. Grok, GROQ, immediately took the open source, put it on their infrastructure, and now you can run DeepSeek extremely quickly. I mean, very, very fast, very inexpensively on there. And it's not in China, so you don't have to worry about all the same data issues.
That's interesting. So that is actually interesting. So you're practically moving the database and the language learning model to something more secure and trustworthy, so to speak. As I understood. Yeah, that's interesting. So what I'm hearing from you here is that the most was not the fundraising, but actually the technology itself, because it's evolving so fast and it's going, and there are many players, that it's sort of, how should I put it? It sort of, was it overwhelming, or is it overwhelming?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, what we realized was it was too hard for us to do it all ourselves. We knew that right from the beginning. We knew we weren't going to be able to do it all ourselves, but we looked at, gee, do we need to hire a lot of people that are experts in AI? And that was quickly impractical, given how much you would have to pay for people. So we said, let's make a bet on the ecosystem evolving. But, you know, then there's timing. And I'll be honest, like, it's great to think that you're ahead of everybody and you have something, but it's sometimes not so good to be early, because you end up spending money that you never really get much out of because you can't get very far. So I think in our case, that was the case. And as late as, like, I'd say beginning of second quarter of last year, we were really ready to give up. We just had said, it just isn't working. We just can't get it to work right to way we want it to work. And then that's when Grok, GROQ, suddenly opened up capacity, which is only in the last few months been scalable, where you can actually, they have enough capacity. So it's been it's a road where you have to get the timing right. If you're too early, that's just as bad as being too late sometimes. So
I think it's so being a pioneer is I understand it has its risks, but it sure has its reward as well. You know, I think it might be, as you're saying, for our young listeners who want to try and explore the world of AI or entrepreneurship, that there are some risks to take, but I'm sure that there must be some fun in this.
Oh yeah, it's very fun. It's great. I mean, it's a lot of fun. I think, I think one of the things, if you're starting out now, like if I was starting this now, I would do it very differently. Just because a year ago, even there were not all the tools to put together the pieces. Things that we had to struggle to get to work can be done very quickly now. So for example, integrating voice to text, text to voice, large language models, telephony, all these things, those are just a lot of work to get together. But now there's tools that just already integrate those, and you just sort of plug them together easily. And so I think there's two things to take away from that. One is that if you're starting something now, if you're just starting out, there's an incredible number of tools that lowers the barrier of entry to you to start something now. So that's good, and it means you can experiment. The bad thing is it's lowered the barriers for everybody. so
everybody's competing.
Yeah, and this is, you saw that the stock market dropped $1 trillion when DeepSeek was released, and that's a whole complicated bunch of things that went on there. But one thing that I think I would take away from that at a very high level is that the barriers of entry to competitors in AI is going to be an issue that's going to keep coming up. You're going to see other stock market drops, or companies getting acquired or going out of business, or you're going to see all kinds of booms and busts based on people suddenly realizing that the defensibility maybe was not what they thought it was.
That's interesting. I wanna just go back what you just said there, Peter. Would you say we would have a new .com bubble?
See, I actually lived through that. I was fortunately lucky to sell a company, and then I took a company public and left right before the .com bust. So I've been through that, and I would say it's not the same thing. I mean, maybe someday that will happen, but I think back then there was a question of how big was the internet going to be. It was not a sure thing. They were still, even at the year 2000, they were not convinced that it was necessarily that important. Like the mobile smartphone was not out yet. It was not everywhere. And so people were like, oh, maybe this has been overdone. And there were even at the top of the market, people were skeptical all through the 90s. There were plenty of people that didn't think the internet was that important. It's hard to believe that now. Whereas AI, everybody thinks it's important. I've never seen anything in my entire life where 100% of people believe that something will be a big deal. So it was really a matter of, also interest rates went up very quickly around 2000, and then that caused the bubble to burst.
Yeah.
I think right now there's no question that the demand is going to be there for AI on a massive scale. I don't think anybody questions that. The question really is, where does the money go and where do you get it back? And I think that's the thing. It's, you know, I tell this story. I used to be the CTO of a public company that built data centers and hosted, you know, and managed servers. And around 2000, we went public. And at the time, there were other companies building tons of data centers, and then fiber optic networking companies building networks all over the world with thousands of fiber strands. And the demand kept going up. Now, there was a little dip at one point when the economy went down, but basically the bandwidth thing isn't interesting because bandwidth needs kept going up. People were just getting broad and went through the roof, way beyond what anybody anticipated. But what they didn't anticipate when they put the fiber in was that the devices they would put on the ends would make more and more traffic be able to go through. So it went up and it doubled, and then it went up 10 times and 100 times. Between the 90s, when they started putting that in, to today, it's 40,000 times more data in that single strand. So almost every network company went bankrupt, data center company went bankrupt. Now they're building them more than ever. And so I'm not saying the same thing is going to happen, but it just, you know, you have to figure out where the timing and where can you get the money out of it, and what are the factors going on. And I think with AI, when we were talking about somebody starting a company, you just have to look and say, where, you know, is the money going to be in? Is OpenAI going to capture the money? Is it the company? Is Microsoft and Amazon with their data centers? Are they going to capture the money, or is it going to be the companies that make the applications? Is it going to be ones that stitch things together? I don't think anybody really knows yet how that's all going to.
Because all of these is very diffuse or very unclear yet in the market, as you mentioned, because there are many players. You have Meta, you have Google, you have Amazon, you have Oracle, Microsoft, you know, and then there are many small startups coming up, and then they develop AI for the 1/3 of the price, or even for free suddenly.
Right.
Then you'll have a chain reaction, which is whereas you may be paying for the OpenAI for $200 a month, their pro version, whereas somebody might say, okay, we'll give you the same, but only for $10. You know, what's going to happen? That's,
I mean, the thing is, if we look at the .com bust in 2000, I don't remember what year Google started, but I believe it was after that. Amazon was big, but it was not nearly as big as it's now.
You had Alta Vista. You had Alta Vista.
Yeah, Alta Vista. The smartphone was not out yet, and so streaming Netflix and streaming video, like, that wasn't out yet. None of that stuff had happened, and yet there was a sense that suddenly we had overbuilt and done everything. So obviously that wasn't true. It was just a little blip. And I think all these discussions about capacity now, I think, are good to have, but we have to realize that the smartphone and the Netflix of AI don't exist yet. Nobody's come up with them yet. And so we're talking, like, you don't even hear anybody talking about robots. Like, robots are exploding in their functionality based on all the things with AI. So everything we see with a new release of OpenAI or these open source models, they're all feeding their way into robotics. So our whole world on how we, in autonomous vehicles and all these things are going to be changing the way we live our life. So it's hard to predict if our lives are changing and how we live is changing. Where's the money to be made? You can pick one thing, but it's hard to anticipate the impact of all these other things. So, like, for example, what we do, like the fact that you're interviewing me right now, hopefully I'm being absolutely fascinating, but you could also talk to my chatbot and my AI clone, and maybe not do quite as good a job, but you could talk to it 24/7 and ask more questions. So how does the world change when just these really radical things start happening? And so I, like, for example, I would envision that in a few years, you or I might have this conversation, which would be released as it is now, but there would be an AI version of it where at any time someone could interrupt and say, hey, Victor, could you talk more about this? Or Peter, could you do this? So any of the listeners, after we've done recording this, and then our AI clones would jump in and make it a customized podcast interaction that would be on the fly. And you think about that, like, it's very likely that someday that's how media will be. It'll still be created, but there'll be an AI engine behind it that you can then interact with, and nothing will ever be finished, like completely.
I see. You're in control of that. But let's have that talk, because I have a question related to that. But let's get into the next one.
Sure.
I want to talk about leadership qualities are very critical for running an AI company, or any given company for that matter. What would you suggest for the young entrepreneurs who are listening and watching now? What qualities are critical in running an AI company?
Well, I think I would, before I answer that, I would just say the qualities for leading, or I think there's always always look at, like, there's founders, there's leaders, there's managers, there's there's all these people, there's different roles that you play.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to look at each of those and know where you're strong, where you're not strong, and just be realistic. Sometimes some people are not very good leaders, but excellent managers at logistics of stuff. And maybe in the past that hasn't been that's been hard then to create a company that involves lots of different personality types. So let's say you're not really a people person, but you're really good at organizing process and things. Well, you're not typically the person that ends up maybe leading a company. Maybe you start something, but then eventually when you're dealing with salespeople, and maybe you find it hard to do that. So, however, with AI, what's interesting is, so in the past, if you were a founder of a company and you were, say, pitching an investor, and you came off as maybe super technical, but not a people person, you might not have gotten too far. But that's changed over the years, because people realize the technology is so powerful and has a network effect that somebody who maybe has less social skills can still run a successful company. And I think that's been proven over the years, whereas a few decades ago, that was very rare. Now, I think you're getting a situation where, because of AI and agent technology, you need to be thinking, like, not only what is it that my company is going to do in AI, but how am I going to use AI to be successful at marketing, at managing, at running my company? So I have to eat my own dog food, in the sense, like, you have to be an AI first company, even if you're making a kitchen appliance, whatever it is. Like, you need to think, like, how am I going to control my costs of hiring? How am I going to do my coding more efficiently? How is my customer support going to be absolutely AI optimized? How am I going to do the best kind of targeted marketing with customized messaging and videos or whatever, based on what I can do with AI? Because if you can't perform at a high level in AI in actually executing, you're not going to be able to keep up, because other companies who have a crummy product, who maybe is not as good as yours, if they can do all those things right, they'll still crush you. So I think we're getting into a very unusual point where, like, the companies that are creating products in AI, there will be so many of them in any category, because it's relative, that the ones that will win will be more and more in how they execute using AI to go to market.
If I might add to what you just say now, Peter, just to clarify. So one of the biggest quality as a leader, I would say, because lastly, when I read the articles and research, it says many leaders in Norway or Nordic, and might also can be also USA, but Nordic region and Europe, it says that many leaders don't know what their employees are doing with the AI, called shadow AI. They are
Yeah.
far more intelligent people working with this daily, while the leaders are, sorry for my language, are clueless of what they're actually doing. And what you're pointing out is quite interesting, because what you, if I understood you correctly, what you're saying, that leaders should actually be AI literacy. He or she should understand what AI is, what its possibilities are, what its functions are, and what it can do and cannot do. If I understood you correctly, that's like,
Yeah, I think so. And I think I was just speaking to somebody that was this, I forget what company it was, but I was saying that you really need to do two things. Number one is you have to think, and this doesn't go just for startups, this is for any company on the planet right now. You need to really be thinking over the next few months, how am I going to make my company an AI first company? How is AI going to be absolutely made critical no matter what business you're in? If you're literally any business, you need to be at least every month or two kind of getting everybody in the team to get together and going, are we missing some opportunity here that we could be doing using AI to either be more productive, higher quality, better customer support, better sales? What is it? Where are the opportunities? Because your competitors are going to be doing that. And right now, one of them uses ChatGPT, the other doesn't. Maybe it's not going to put you out of business. But down the road, as these get more powerful, if you're just a person who's not looking at this is one of those moments that, if you were a retailer who just ignored the internet in the 90s, eventually it caught up with you. So the other thing is, I would go so far to say, look, the CEO of the company may not be that technically savvy, or they need to understand that they need to understand this. They have to, even if they ignored every other trend that's ever happened before, this is the one that you have to pay attention to, because it's something they can understand, because it is a programming language in English. It's never happened before. And so that's what makes it so powerful. But the thing is, I would go so far as to say, with any company, you should get your employees and you should have a meeting with the whole company and say, AI is absolutely critical to our strategy. We don't know exactly how yet, but we want you to tell us. You're the employees, you're working with us every day. I want everybody here. Every month, we're going to give an award out to the person who has the best idea for how to make our company more efficient or more productive using AI. And we're going to celebrate that. And we're going to have another one that's going to be the biggest failure. And we're maybe give them more money. Because you got to get people to experiment. And I think that one thing would just change everybody's thinking, wow, this is actually that important that I have to think about that. And that's where you're going to get your answers. And the CEO will learn from the ground up, because those are the people that will find the way to use AI. Absolutely. And I think it's also important in that scenario, I was saying, with the employees, especially a company that is not a tech company, they can be a little bit uneasy with AI. And I think it helps to celebrate their contribution, which makes them more comfortable with the AI is not going to replace their job. I would also say that I do think there's going to be an interesting moment coming in the next year or two where a lot of companies are going to be tempted to cut people. There's going to be a financial downturn sometime in the next few years, who knows when. And I think it's important to say, look, we want to expand our company, use AI to expand and make each one of you more valuable, rather than replace you. But the reality is that, your competitors are going to be doing that. Some companies will cut while the other competitors say, great, let's just crush the other guy with, with all this new power we have with AI. So.
And becoming better, and being weak. And I like that thought, and that is something I would like all the listeners and the viewers to take out. If you're CEO, CTO, or somebody working at a company, that utilize AI. That's what Peter and now we are discussing. Utilize AI what it's worth, because it won't actually take over the role of human. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that it will enhance our capabilities to make us better in our work and the possibility to succeed is much higher. So that's interesting. So let's get into the next question here about what are the key challenges unique to leading an AI company compared to other tech sectors? If we're going to, you mentioned some
Yeah.
about the technology, but
yeah, I think, well, the first one, there's no question to me, the first thing is that the speed, the pace at which change is happening makes it very, very difficult to stay on course. And I think, you know, one of the things about leading is you are in fact leading other people. You're saying, okay, we could go here, 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 but we're going here. And the problem is, as a leader, if you're doing this all the time, people start to wonder if you know what you're doing. Like, and so you have a balance between being clear in the direction you're leading, but at the same time, you have to be nimble. So you have to get that trust with the team. That balance was saying, like, I'm not going to go after the latest shiny object. Some new technology comes along, I want to do this or that, but actually stay focused on what the goal. And I have to say that, you know, I talk to other investors, I talk to other companies I've invested in, and other startups, and it's definitely, there is a you know, there's a wide spectrum of how savvy they are of what's happening with AI right now. Like I'm so in this every day that I assume other people realize what a big deal this is. But there's even tech companies today that their entire future is going to be dependent on this, and they're not really sure what they're doing yet. So you have to take seriously that you have to be up on the drivers. You have to spend a certain amount of time staying up with what's happening with AI, more than just, you know, a general newspaper. You've got to get into a little bit of it, because you will make a, like, if you can imagine that the biggest technology that's ever, it's probably the most impactful technology that's ever come out in our life, except maybe the internet, has just been, it's getting better faster than anything I've ever seen, and there's no operating manual. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, that is just, there is no manual. The people that have created these tools don't entirely know how they work even. So that leads this up to the idea that there's all kinds of opportunities. So if you're a founder of a company or a CEO of a company, you need to be thinking, there's not like a book that I can go read and it tells me it could do this, this, and not this. Nobody knows. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's so that means that it can impact you in ways that are very hard to anticipate. So
I want to take that. If you said, as you said there, it would impact greatly. Recently, I read about Google, who using Gemini, for instance, or Bard. They erased one sentence or edited some sentence saying that it's now allowed to use in weaponry, which was, lastly, as I read, it was not. And so did OpenAI. They also did the same. And this is a kind of ethical aspect, which I'm going to go in with you now. What ethical concerns arise with AI tools that simulates human, not empathy, but actually, I would say, human tendency? Because here we are looking at our ego, our drive to conquer, command. I would say nothing good, actually, when I see these changes. That's my personal aspect. You might be agreeing with me there or disagree, but how can we actually change, because the changes we are seeing are so rapidly that normal person don't understand how fast it's going, and we have a few dominant people like tech companies who are controlling, and we have a lot of data which are being utilized at the moment. Okay, how can we withstand these aspects that, okay, we'll not come in a situation where AI will be weaponized? Because if that happens, I wouldn't like that world, to be honest. That would be Terminator right over again.
Well, I think, you know, I first should say that I'm generally a person who's very optimistic about technology, and I, you know, excited about all the things AI can do. On the other hand, there's a group that's I'm part of that meets every month. That it's kind of like a book club for a podcast. We pick a podcast episode, and a friend of mine, Brandon Upchurch, has put this together, and it's amazing. And we basically talk about some episode from some podcast about AI, and we just get together and talk about it. And it always ends up going in a very dystopian place at the end. But it's not the Terminator kind of thing. It goes for more of a social fabric unraveling of what it is to be human and people's self-worth. So I think it's important to know that there's all these different paths that could be good, but some of them are bad, that are the sci-fi things we think of. And I tend not to worry about those too much. Although if you're in a totalitarian country, you've got some problems. It's only going to get worse. The policing, we've already got weapons systems that are basically run by AI, and they could be automatically killing people based on whether we want to let the software do that. I mean, that's essentially what I understand to be the case. So we're already right on the edge on the weapon systems, and that's only going to get worse. And I honestly, that's not my area to focus. It's a big issue. I think where you see something that's happening right now in the United States, and I'm not talking about this, I'm not taking a political side here. I'm just going to say right now, you may have heard about Elon Musk is, on behalf of the Trump administration, is going in and trying to cut all the costs in all these different departments. And the US government is so huge that it's hard to really comprehend how big it is. It's very big. And so the way he's doing that is he's getting into the data systems, the payroll systems, all the systems that have information, and they're sucking all this data. And he has the biggest AI data center in the world right now in terms of chips synced together. So they're analyzing all this data in a way that a year ago would be impossible. You can't, nobody, Elon Musk right now using AI knows more about what is going on in the United States government than anybody in the United States government by a mile. Scary. So no, people are upset about that, and I'm going to leave that for other people to decide whether that's good or not. But the point is, it's like he can use that for good or for evil, depending on, so can he cut waste? Absolutely. He has for the first time probably a view of what's going on, that he can find things to make it more efficient. That's never been possible before. And that's 100% because of AI. And that just didn't exist a year ago. You couldn't do this.
And that's good, actually.
But the downside is, of course, he can use that to go after enemies. He can find things with a political, connection, things they want to eliminate that have social agendas or political agendas. So anyway, so I think that's the kind of thing we're going to run into probably sooner, is how is this information and how is AI being used to shape big things in our society? Is it being shaped the way we want it to? I think the average person doesn't understand any of this that's going on. They see Elon Musk and they're worried, but they don't actually understand what's going on. And it's actually probably even more scary and exciting at the same time than they realize.
It's funny because we talked about Elon Musk, but because you literally answered one of my questions, which I'm going to ask you, which was, why do you think many think that AI creates a power imbalance when only certain employee or certain team or person have access to advanced tools? And when you gave a wonderful example about Elon Musk, that he may use it for something more not so good term, but he's actually using it for some efficiency and cutting costs, as you said. But then again, it's a human agenda here, which is almost uncertain to tell now.
Right. Well, you bring up something really interesting there, though, what you just said, though, which was that the fact that he is using it, it made me think, like, it's even if it was there for the government to use, they can't use it due to their own internal rules and security and lack of knowledge about it, meaning this is cutting edge stuff. So that's a good illustration of saying, well, shouldn't the government have been using these tools? But they have to be careful how they get used. It's very complicated. I certainly don't have the answers to this, but I think that is the first AI crisis in the world has happened in the last week. Two of them. One is DeepSeek, and the one Elon Musk getting into the Treasury Department and pulling out data from the billing system. Those are big moments that I'm not sure the China one was easier to understand in some ways, but this one maybe is less. I've read almost nobody talking about this. They talk about it, but they don't talk about how AI is what's behind it.
I think it's interesting actually because that magnitude example, what we're talking about, how AI is actually being utilized efficiently for such a huge country as the USA, and administration of USA is quite massive, so to speak. Let me just go into the other one. We'll talk about the aspect of human now. What ethical concerns would you say arise when we use AI tools that simulate human empathy or relationships? Now, you being that we're talking about your company where you have an avatar of me or yourself, and we also talked about the future, that the technology is evolving so fast that we might come to a stage that it might be human alike. Then the question is, what ethical concerns is there when it comes to simulating human empathy or relationship using AI tools?
Yeah. Well, I think I would first say that, there's always been a history from the beginning of time of people creating relationships, emotional relationships that are not real. Okay. Whether that is somebody
Platonic?
who, what?
You mean platonic relationship, or
not necessarily. One of the oldest businesses, I guess. But I mean, like people, there's varying degrees of when people are giving you real empathy or faking their empathy. So that happens in our world, and sometimes we just like to pretend that doesn't happen, but it does happen. And then there's, I'm struck by, for example, in Japan, how for a long time there's been the idea of a hostess, who is somebody that who's hired to basically talk to a businessman at the end of their day. They go for drinks and just listen to their problems. It's not a romantic thing. It's just like this sort of some other relationship sort of in the middle there. And now you get into social media where people have these relationships with influencers, but they're not really relationships. There may be, there's sort of this fabricated relationship. So we've always had these different things. Now with AI, you can do it in a real-time way that can be very convincing. And I think, it's like anything, it can be good and bad. So one of the things is, let's take, for example, mental health. So mental health, one of the things about mental health is you talk to a therapist, and although the therapist has a degree, or maybe an advanced degree, most of the time they're just 99% of the time they're just listening to you.
Correct.
And they're not saying anything stupid. They're basically listening to you. They're trying to maybe get a little bit more out of you and come back with a little bit, but they try not to get too much. As someone who spent a lot of time in therapy in my life, I'm knowledgeable of this. And some of it works and some of it doesn't. But a lot of people will say, well, what about using AI for therapists? In the United States, there's a huge crisis of mental health. There's huge problems we have. We don't have enough practitioners to help with this problem. So we can pretend that's going to go away, or we can start to use AI, which is already being used by millions of people for companion friend therapist type of apps. And the thing is that a lot of people that I tell my age about this, they go, wow, why would I want to talk to a person that's not real? But if you talk to somebody younger and you do surveys, many of them would prefer to talk to someone that is not real, because they feel they can be really open and not judged. And so that's also a generational thing, but also something you get used to. I think that it will be I think in the mental health space is an example of, you can create the feeling of empathy that it can be a fictional person, but more likely it'll be an extension of a real person. So I go to my therapist, but my insurance isn't going to pay for enough sessions. I see them instead of once every other week, maybe once a month. And then 24/7, I have access to their AI clone, which has been shaped not only to sound and appear to be them, but to respond the way they think they would like to respond. It also knows all the history. Like, your therapist doesn't have perfect memory, but a clone therapist that's an extension can also alert them if there's self-harm. You've mentioned killing yourself or something. They could get an alert saying, hey, maybe I should intervene here, and it's time for the. So we need to think of these things as, how they're used. Now, the other side is the friend. Okay. And there again, in Europe, I think you have the fabric of your society is maybe a little bit stronger than the United States. Like, we have some problems where we have a loneliness. Our Surgeon General said we have a loneliness epidemic. I mean, it is a huge problem. Like, I think like 18% of people say they don't have a single friend. It's and 30% of people are lonely. So this is a problem that you can't just make go away. Something's wrong. That we can spend another 10 hours talking about what's wrong with it. But the point is that we can wish those people would have friends, and we can solve the problems as to why they might be. In the meantime, this could be a critical situation where somebody needs to, or they have social anxiety, and having an ability, maybe you or I won't have that problem, but they might find talking to someone who is not real can get them to the point where they're comfortable talking to real people. It can be a way for them just to stop the bleeding, so to speak. On the other hand, if you're too reliant on those, or romantic relationships, virtual girlfriends or boyfriends, that seems to me that it could be okay, but it could be very dangerous in the long term. We could have a culture that is even more separated than we are now. But I also wouldn't bet against innovation solving these problems. And so if I think of all the problems that AI might solve, I don't think it's going to ever be as worse as what social media has done right now. Social media has caused so much harm to our society. And I think, AI could cause just as much harm in that area of relationships, but I don't think it has to. And I think we need to be smart about how do we educate people on what they're using, just as if you explain to people how social media actually influences their opinions, that would be really helpful. But we don't have a warning label on social media.
No, we
So,
don't, and that's the thing. And I would also like just to add what you're saying when loneliness is also an issue in Norway. I think the 21% of people between the age of 13 up to 21 are lonely in Norway.
okay.
Yeah, so we have a huge number here as well. So it's not it seems it's a common factor around as we are becoming more digitally. I would say that's my assumption. We sort of have many friends online, but we don't go out. We don't have the same aspect as we used to when we were kids. Is from my time, so that's interesting. We just moving on. To respect of the time, we will just go out and think about uh, uh, why do you think if we're going into intuition versus AI in decision making, that's an aspect which is quite interesting. We have talked about it a bit in bits and bytes, but I want to go a bit deeper into that, and by asking you, are there specific types of decisions where human intuitions will always surpass AI? Because we talked about it, and you said about AGI, the ultimate human AI might come, but will we be better, or AI surpass us?
I think I don't know that I have an answer for that, except to bring up a couple of things that maybe indicate where we are and where it might go. And that is that people look at us reaching this level of intelligence with AI that can come up with things that humans cannot. And I think everything I've seen so far all these advances in AI all seem to be about mostly taking information that exists and reshuffling it. So like if in terms of I want to create something, it would take me hours to do, but AI can help me do it much quickly, create an outline for something, or a report, or write a poem. And even writing a poem seems like it's creative, but really it's been trained on millions of other poems and it's just reshuffling words around. So sometimes AI can get maybe more credit than it's due in terms of its originality. But also I think humans think we're a lot more original than we are, which is a weird thing about AI, that is a mirror that faces us, that shows you that, you know, you've only experienced thousands of people in your life, but AI has consumed billions of people's information and sees the patterns of how similar people come up with the same ideas over and over again. And we just don't realize it, but AI realizes it. And so I think that, you know, when we look at AI making decisions, it's making decisions because it has more information. It's
More
not,
data.
and so it's making a decision, and we can, you know, we can tell it, make the decision based on this kind of logic, or make it based on more creativity, or make it based on this agenda or that agenda. So you can shape it, but it's really just sucking in so much information that it has more information to make a decision with possibly fewer errors than a human. But that is not an original idea. And I've yet to, and I know that AI is being used, not typically large language models, but other types of AI is being used for drug discovery. But again, if you look at how it's discovering the drugs, it's churning out all these different combinations of proteins that just, it could be done by a human, it would just take forever. And so what I'm really looking is the moment going to come where it comes up with something original? And then that brings up the question, is a human actually able to come up with something original? Or are we really just reshuffling all the things that we've experienced and learned? Are we just are we just word probability engines ourselves, just like AI? Or are we actually something different? And I think, you know, to me, the crisis that will be the biggest thing that comes in the next few years is all of humanity seeing themselves in this AI mirror and going, either they're going to say, yeah, like it can never do that thing that they said it was going to do. It never could do it. And we can still do this thing, this spark, or it'll be showing us, wow, I'm not as original as I thought. I'm not as creative as I thought. I can't do what this machine can do. What is my self-worth as a human? And I think these is a big crisis that an entire planet having to face. Now, if you're a subsistence farmer, maybe this isn't going to be a crisis for you, but it's going to be a crisis for people who typically haven't had to face this kind of stuff. And I think so. In answering your question about
if AI would ever achieve singularity, that's what I was aiming at. You know, become more smarter than us humans. And according to what you're saying, Peter, and I think I understand what you're projecting here, is that it is eventually a creation of humanity. It's a it's a machine, you know. And in order to achieve something better, we have to overcome ourselves in one way to make it predict better or use better data, and that would take time. And I sort of agree with you with what you were aiming at. That I myself don't think we'll reach singularity anytime soon. Maybe after 2040, 2050, but it's still so far in the time that it's speculating. You know, I think we we are in a phase now as humans, as you already mentioned it when we were talking, we're trying to evolve, find out what can we use it for, what are the rules, regulations. We are trying to, you know, make something out of it, something suitable. And there are many people who are still yet AI illiterate. They don't know what AI actually can do. So we are in we are in a very starting phase, though. Even though
Yeah.
AI is something from 1950s, funny enough, but it's now we are actually trying to figure it out. So I like what you're thinking, and I sort of agree what you are saying about the singularity, about the issue. Um, when
Yeah.
it comes to bias, if I could add that
Yeah.
bias
Yeah.
effect, like in what way do cultural and organizational biases affect the way a human accept or reject AI interaction or recommendations?
Well, I think you bring up something very interesting, that just the whole concept of bias, which is, we all know it's there, and we try to regulate it and create laws to manage it and societal norms. But then you do something, create AI models, and then you realize how much bias there is in
Mm,
everything that has to
mm,
be sucked into AI, and it just amplifies the bias sometimes. On the other hand, you can mitigate the bias if you consciously go in and do it. And so I think there's a big opportunity for AI to unintentionally insert bias, and there's a great opportunity to take bias out of other things that we do without AI that we maybe can eliminate some of. So for example, there was a large consulting firm that we talked to that wanted to create a AI clone of their business coaches that
mm,
work within the organization, because consulting firms will get 30 people together on a team for 3 months and then disband the team and then reassemble a different group. So these
mm,
teams have to somehow work as a team. They've never worked together before for a very brief time. So they
mm,
use business coaches, and they meet with each employee for 15 minutes every two, almost like a therapist kind of. Is everything going okay? Who's getting on your nerves? How do you work better as a team? And it's very labor intensive. So they
mm,
wanted to clone the top people, which is
mm,
another thing, which is the best people at something. If you clone them, they're going to be better than, maybe they're not as good as the best person, but they're going to be better than some of the not so good people
mm,
who, so that's something that will be an issue in the future. But uh, the, they realized that they have thousands and thousands of hours of transcripts from all
mm,
these coaching sessions for years. They can
mm,
train it. And if they
mm,
train it on that,
mm,
plus the writing, the book that the top coach wrote, they can create this amazing coach. But what they also think it can do is it can take bias out. They think one of the problems is that coaches always have bias.
mm,
And so that gets inserted into the whole thing, and they can
mm,
extract that. Maybe they'll have to experiment, but they can get so that the coaching doesn't have the same bias that a real
mm,
person does. And
mm,
so that's an interesting thing, that you really could use this. Of course, again, I think there's a way you could use it and a way you should use it. And what you could do is you could just replace people and just say, you can't talk to a coach. You can only talk to a clone coach, and that will eliminate bias. Well,
mm,
that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. The best thing would be to say you can talk to the clone of the coach, and you can still talk to the coach, and the coach will learn from the clone
mm.
as to how to be less biased, and it will be a loop where it becomes an extension, and the clone learns from the real person, but the real person learns from the clone. It's a weird concept,
Yeah,
but I think
it's
we will have all that
it's
happening.
it is like you learn from the AI. The best person learns from the AI, and then she goes from the data, becomes better, and then it's a loop of becoming better and better, and that makes then you have a unique protege, so to speak, elite, which
Right.
then comes into another issue. What would you then need the other skilled coach when you have a super coach and you can multiply these super coaches?
This is a very significant question. I know it sounds like a weird question, but I think it's actually going to be one of the most important questions in a very short term. In the next couple of years, this is going to be happening in industry after industry. And you're going to see some people are just going to freak out and be like, I don't want anything to do with this, because they're going to be asked to train the AI clone, and they're going to be threatened by that.
Mm,
And some companies are going to try to do that and get rid of people, and that's not going to work. I know that is not going to work, because
mm,
it's so much more powerful if because I think everybody is going to have an AI clone of themselves. They're going to
mm,
have a different version of it that interacts with the world. There'll be one version of you, like when a family member talks to you and wants to know, what to pick up at the grocery store or what's going on this week, something that can get some information. Whereas a work one that talks to your colleagues about a project that you're working on. There's different
roles. Different. You mean it's like every time we do something, if you're a father, if you're a son, if you're a colleague, if you're a project manager, if you're a client facing, we each of them have our role every single
right.
day. And I think some of us take 5 roles each, 5 to 6 roles every single day, in numerous accounts. If you're an uncle, if you're a dad, if you're a
Right. Right.
and that is interesting, because then the AI would be a clone of me, or you
Right.
would take that role instead, and we would have less stress. I hope so. Less stress in many ways. I would enjoy that, actually, honestly. As long as I would have a job.
Yeah, I think when we start to get comfortable with this idea, and we start to go, okay, so there's not just me. It's funny, but creating a clone, when you write the clone prompt about yourself, you actually have to reflect on who you are. We're making it so that it syncs with documents and things, and can learn from things you've written or a social media post, whatever you want to have it trained on. But when you really have to look and go, who am I creating? Am I putting out an honest version of myself? Like social media, nobody puts out an exact version of themselves. It's some kind of version. And so I think in that process, you can start to see how a clone isn't something you will create and be done with it. A clone will grow with you. It will sync to your data. It will, if it's for work, it will sync with the projects you're working on. And then you can't go to a meeting. People can ask you questions about the project. And of course, it'll also record the meeting and put it into your clone's memory, so it knows what happened to that meeting and has all the context of the project. But if you're talking to, a friend, that's a different set of things that are important, or a family member, or we think about these personas that we put together. If you've ever been on a dating site, on Match.com or something, you are creating this presentation of who you think you are, with the idea that you're reading theirs, and really, essentially, that's your clone trying to match up with some other clones, right? and I think there's a Black Mirror episode about this, where you can go on thousands of dates where your clones will talk to each other and have all these interactions, and then the best ones will filter up and be recommended to you. So I think in the future, everyone will have their clone. They'll use it for dating. They'll use it for, for work. And it'll be something we put a lot of effort into.
I love that. I love the clone idea. Honestly, I think it would save me a lot of time. I could have one clone for my wife.
Let's get you set up with one. We'll get you set up next week with one.
Yeah, wonderful. I would love trying it, guys. And for those who's listening and watching it, I'm gonna put out a snippet video of it after our talks with my friend Peter here. We're gonna just try, and you're gonna see how far we have come. Okay, Now, let me just go into the final questions here now. Given the rapid advancement in AI and its application, we talked about how fast it's going. We see in the progression. We talked about singularity. We see where we are today. You mentioned the struggles you had, and also admitted that it's going much faster than the internet, and it's hard for many to keep up. And how do you think AI will actually evolve over the next 5 years? If you would elaborate and reflect on that. Now, I know it's very speculative, but I would love to hear your honest opinion. Where you said yourself that you're optimist. So where is your optimist taking you on this question?
It's funny. I gave a talk at a conference just a week ago, and I had to give the talk was business and life in the next 5 years from AI, and what's going to impact it. And I think, first of all, I would just say that my feeling is we're going to enter an economic boom cycle that's probably not like anything. The 80s and 90s, we had a big boom from computers, and then the 90s, the internet. So there was a pretty long productivity boom and wages went up, at least in the United States. And then things kind of slowed down for a while. And I think maybe smartphones made us less productive. I don't know. And I think we're going to enter in a productivity boost, which is a huge economic miracle that happens to the world. I don't think it's going to be equally distributed, though, because there is AI can both empower individuals, but it can also empower large organizations, governments to do things too, and have a lock on things. So how that shakes out, that TBD. But I'm pretty confident. I know Mark Andreessen thinks there's going to be it'll be the Roaring 20s. I kind of think that's going to be the case. There's plenty of things that could go wrong that disrupt that, but I think it's going to be a big deal. However, in the process of productivity gains, we're going to see some people will lose their jobs. More jobs will be created. I think it's all going to work out. But it's going to be very disruptive. And I can't get around that feeling that, in the next 12 to 18 months, you're going to start to see protests against AI jobs and things. It's already happened a little bit, but and some of that will be misunderstanding what's happening, but I think there will be social unrest in the next 5 years because of AI, because it'll be a combination of these people feeling dehumanized or something, and maybe job disruption, and some things that people the next financial downturn, they're going to blame on AI. It doesn't matter whether it had anything to do with it. They're going to blame everything on AI. And I think now there's a national security, and I said in my presentation, I was like, let's get the bad stuff over with quick, because there's plenty of bad things that could happen. And I think the international competition you're seeing with China, and I think that is only going to heat up, whether it's kind of like the space race, maybe got people crazed, maybe more than they needed to. I wouldn't be surprised if even more money, like the US government is very unpredictable right now, but it would not surprise me to see massive amounts of government money going into AI. And so that creates a lot of uncertainty as to what will happen. So I think there's huge productivity gains. I think the big areas, though, if in 5 years we look at, is healthcare is going to have a huge impact. I mean, there's no question. They've already done studies that show ChatGPT 4 or something is better than most doctors. In people were more happy with the results they were getting in terms of diagnosing problems. So, and I think that's going to be dramatically better the next time they do the survey. So you're going to see in diagnostics, whether it's x-rays, everything, hospitals are already doing this. This is going to just, in 5 years, I can't even imagine how much that it'll very quickly have an impact on health. I think education, it is the other area that it is going to make a big difference. It's already changing how people write papers in a probably negative way in colleges and high school. But, this is a chance for everybody to have a tutor. What I hope is that education systems and teachers will embrace this and realize, and not be threatened by it, and realize I've been waiting this my entire life. School to me was always moving very slowly to me. And I would sit there in the class listening to them with a chalkboard. And I think my great grandparents had somebody with a piece of chalk in front of them. And I thought, that doesn't make any sense. So I think, you're going to see personalized, customized education for each person based on how they learn. And we're going to see that happen very quickly. But because of education systems pushing back on some of this, it won't happen as fast as it could. I do think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
May I add, what aspect do you think 5 years from now? We mentioned about the leaders, the companies, and their interaction and their adaptation rate is quite slow at this rate, even though the technology is going fast. How do you see that for 5 years from now on? We want to elaborate on that.
I'm sorry, you're talking about companies or education? I didn't catch that.
I'm talking about the companies. Many users, like we talked about the leaders and the users within the company and the AI, that it's not there where it should be because of the would you seeing a big jump within 5 years that we will reach 80%, 100% AI users?
Yeah, this is gonna. I mean, I think everyone will be using AI in the next 5 years. I don't see
Just like
any
internet?
way that won't be happening. But I
Yeah.
do think this is one of those moments where companies are going to be, there's ones that are not going to make the transition. They're just going to not see how, it's a lot of companies are going to say, we are not in the AI business, therefore it is not that important to us. And I think this is one of those things where people would say, oh, that's a computer thing, or we're not a tech company, but everybody's a tech company now. Like every company has a website, every company does marketing with the internet and tech. Like there's no company now that is not in some way successful or fails based on technology in some way. Even if it's a service that reserves janitors to go, it doesn't matter how
everyone has a phone, everyone has a phone these days, and we use phone, internet all the time, and it doesn't make sense. Why shouldn't you be on a platform or on a device which is used by billions of people around the world? It doesn't, then you won't survive, as you say.
And I think this is one of those things where some people are going to see this and go, I think there'll be three types of companies. There'll be the companies that come out of nowhere that say, we can use AI to just crush some industry because we're thinking about it completely differently. And that's going to happen, as it always does every time, and then there's those companies that will adapt, and there's those that won't adapt and they'll go away. And that is going to happen. But I think it's going to happen in a pretty big way because it's, even if a CEO understands how important this is, their ability to restructure their organization differently to take advantage of AI. I was listening to a podcast recently. I don't know which one it was, but it was about, I think it was the founder of Uber was on. He has a new startup that's doing like meal preparation for delivery. Like they have machines they've built that will create these bowls, and they're just for delivery. So, but they were saying, like, but to optimize that, instead of having humans, you make a completely different kitchen. So if you had to retrofit these robotic systems into a restaurant, it wouldn't work. But if you start from scratch, you get a completely different system. And I think that's the thing. AIs and robotics too, the combination is going to mean a lot of industries are going to have to say, how do we restructure ourselves to take advantage of this potentially huge efficiency? And some companies just won't be able to do that quickly. It'll be very hard for them to do.
I think me and Peter could talk a lot about this, guys, and I think you all had enjoyed this conversation. This is Peter Kirwan here, and I have been the pleasure of talking with him with a lot of topics. We have been talking about professional dynamics on AI, how AI can impact or influence our decision making, personal relationship and AI. We talked about the challenges related to AI and innovations, and we also touched a bit about starting and scaling an AI company. So we got many interesting topics today, people. And as always, if you do like the show, don't forget to tell your parents, tell your friends, and all the people you love, and share it and like it, and tune in next time. Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you, Victor. It's fun.